All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to part two of the Alex Ainscough story. If you can't remember where we left off, we had just finished up kind of recapping Alex's time in Stanford and then his first professional opportunity over in Iceland. Turned out to be quite the difficult experience for him and left kind of in the summer of that first season, which for those who don't know, the Icelandic calendar and a lot of Scandinavian calendars for their football work kind of opposite to what the traditional calendar is from like that August to May range. Usually in Scandinavia, they do it kind of the opposite. So they start in early spring, late winter, kind of February, March, and they go into kind of similar to the MLS calendar. Anyway, that's where we left off. Just about to talk about his experience in the Netherlands, and then he kind of has a bit of a European tour with his career. So we're going to dive into that. I appreciate it if you have listened to the first episode, and I will not waste any more of your time here at the top and kick it right over to the rest of the conversation.
Again, that same academy coach that helped me get to Iceland in the first place. He is Dutch, so he also had some connections in the Netherlands. So he sort of pitched to me, I can send you, like, it's obviously at that point, I think it was beginning of August, so it's late on. It's not really the ideal time to be switching teams. But he's like, I have a team in in the fifth tier in Netherlands, where you can you can play, and then the coach there has a lot of connections with teams at higher levels, so he can maybe get you in for a look with those teams. So went over there for it was like the end of their preseason. This is a team called VV Alverna, and they were in the fifth tier of Netherlands. So I go over there, playing for like 3 weeks. Things are going pretty well. Like, I'm playing in all these preseason games. Like, I feel very comfortable with the team. Training is similar, like 3 days a week in the night. But I mean, first of all, it's in Nijmegen, which is like a pretty decent sized city in Netherlands. So like, I'm living with like a host family. Like, there's stuff to do. Like, I'm enjoying myself. And then I think the third or fourth week in preseason, I get a stress fracture in my tibia, and I'm out for like basically the rest of that fall. Like, didn't get back fit before the winter break. So, and I'm over there rehabbing the whole time. I don't have access to healthcare, so I'm just doing all this rehab by myself. And like, the team didn't really have a physio, so it's kind of just me on my own over there for 3 months. Doing everything I can to get back fit for the spring. Come back home to America for like Christmas and the holidays, just because there was no football going on, and then go back. I'm like fully fit, and the coach had an opportunity for me to train with a team called Achilles, which is it was a team at that time. They were in the second tier of Netherlands. Now I think they're like fifth or sixth. They've had some like horrible financial issues, which like actually I'll get to later, ended up affected me at that club. But yeah, basically had the chance to go train with them, and they train full time. So I was training like sometimes with the first team, sometimes with their second team, which was like under 21s or something like that. And was basically with them for the entire spring. But I wasn't playing matches because I was never training with Alverna. So the coach was basically like, look, I can't, it's not fair to these guys. If you're not here training all week, I can't play you in the games. So basically from January when I came back until it was, so May would have been the end of the Dutch season. I was just training. I was playing no games. I was just training 5 days a week with the second division team. Yeah, and then get to the end of that season, and that club, their owner got arrested for tax evasion, and the club was like forcibly relegated to the third league. And at that time, they had a lot of international players like in their first team, so it was like feasible that I could be brought back
Yeah.
for the next year on a contract. Um, but they basically made the decision like, look, based on our finances, we're only gonna have like local Dutch players for when we go down to the third division. So that opportunity, putting in 4 or 5 months of training there, just basically got like thrown
Oh
out the
my
window.
gosh. When you first started training with the club, it was after that
Mhm.
winter transfer window had closed, right? When you came, like, because you came back
Correct.
after the holidays. So,
Mhm.
I mean, looking back on it, again, we do this where we look back and we say, oh, maybe things would have done differently. But is there anything that you think, would was that experience worth it for having all of that training at that super high level, knowing maybe that you didn't get the games that you perhaps needed, or it didn't come to fruition in the contract? Like that can happen for a million and one different reasons, as I'm sure you know, and I've laid out here on the podcast why you might not get a contract. So that can't always be the thing that you think about makes a success or a failure out of an opportunity. But being that you were in that training environment for so long, I'm sure there was a lot more that you had put into that.
Right. But again, I think that really hammered home to me. Like coming out of that really hammered home to me the importance of
Mm,
playing games because I mean, you have to think now. We're taught, so we've covered, I think, so far in my career, like three or
yeah.
4 years. And you go from Stanford, barely played. Northeastern, played a few games, left the team. Iceland, played literally
Mm,
one game there. Go to Netherlands, play a few preseason games, get injured, come back, and you're just training. So we're talking about now like 2.5, 3 years where I basically like
yeah.
haven't played. And like at a certain point, like that just catches up with you. And like you cannot train hard enough or well enough to make up that difference,
Yep.
I don't think, between the competition around you. Um, so yeah, there were things I learned from it, but I honestly could have been better off in retrospect, playing the whole season with the fifth division team. And like, I think I would have like comfortably done well enough at that level to like, move up and get a even fourth or third or something
Mm,
like a higher level in Netherlands. You know what I mean? Or even if I don't stay in Netherlands, like just that game experience, like I really just think you can't
yeah.
replace
So
that.
is that then your mindset leaving that season is like wherever I go next, I need games. Like without a doubt, I need games.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I directly came back home that summer and played
Ah.
USL two, or it was PDL at the time, but I came back. So I came back in May. From June, July, August, I played with Boston Bolts,
Mm-hmm.
PDL, just because I'm like I need to play somewhere and like played all those games and like that was a good experience to get that back.
Good. So then did it?
But like in the first, even going, I was gonna say going into that, like I definitely did notice like my rhythm in the initial maybe first 2 or 3 games was like
Yeah.
so off because I hadn't played so little 11v11 like competitive action. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And so then like when you're coming back to that Boston Bulls experience and then you get games under your belt, starting to feel more confident, does that lead you to think, hey, maybe I should try this over here in the States? Or is it like just where the opportunities are coming from? Like, I think I'm kind of curious, and I think maybe others out there would be curious too, as like really how opportunities come about for guys who are, trying to do that, right? Because I think it's about like where are you actually looking, who are you actually asking, and is it more like I want this one specific thing, or is it I'm trying to reach out to those who are willing to help me, and sort of whatever they're bringing to me, I'm gonna explore that and probably go in that direction because it's a little bit of an easier route.
Yeah, I think it was more of that. It's just like that's it was a huge problem. Like at the end of the day, I mean it must be pretty obvious when you look at my transfer market, but like I didn't have a plan for any of
Mm,
this. Like, it was kind of just I would get to the end of a season and be like, okay, well, what am I
yeah,
gonna do now? Like I get to the end of the Netherlands and it's like, okay, well, I guess I got to go back to America. I get to the end of the USL season and it's like, okay, well, now it's August. At that time, USL not as much of a thing as it is
Yep.
now, like not as many opportunities there. Um, where could I even find a team right
Mm.
now to play on? And that's the point where it becomes okay, well, I got to reach out to different connections and like thankfully, because of my experience in youth football, because of as well my dad, like some of the experiences that he built up from his coaching career, like I did have people that were willing to
Hmm.
help me, and a lot of people are not as lucky as I am to be able to have people that will help them out to get them trials in different places. So that's where I think you do need to have more of a pulse for like you know, when if I want to go play in this country, like when are the best times to go over? When are they actually looking at players versus trying to go over there in the middle of their season? Um, Things like that, I had no idea of at
Mm.
that time.
So where did you wind up landing next as you're kind of having that next moment of figuring it out?
What should I do? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I got to the end of that season, and like I've had a good season, but I mean it was not going to be enough to get me like into an MLS or USL or anything like that. So reached out to one of my dad's former players at Northeastern, was German, and yeah, he had a bunch of connections over like Regionalliga, Oberliga level in Germany, and was like, yeah, I'll go give it a shot there. So I went to his brother was playing in Oberliga for a team called uh,
Hmm.
Oberakern, which is in like Southwest Germany. Um, Went over there for 2 weeks and honestly just did not perform well enough in that trial to like get signed. Um, I was like also super impressed with like, wow, this is like the fifth
Yeah.
level of Germany. Like this is better than the team I was on in Iceland. Like could not believe it. Um, but yeah, so that didn't work out. Then he sent me to, um, funnily enough, a Regionalliga team in a city called Bayreuth, which is like it's in the Bavarian
Okay.
region. So it's like maybe an hour from an hour from Nuremberg, something like that. And I just it's one of those things. It's like I've just played way
Mm.
better there. Um, so I ended up signing with that team. And then so as I'm trialing with that team, they're in the middle of like a horrible losing streak, like maybe 5, 6 games, something like that. Um, so I remember this is in October when I'd gone over there in September, was training. Finally, I get signed in October, and I remember I signed on a Friday and was like waiting to get registered for the next week, hopefully. Um, they had a game on the Saturday, they lost. I came in Sunday with the team for like their recovery session, and they said, "Oh, we fired the coach." So, so the coach that just
Yeah.
signed me, who I had like a pretty good rapport with, spoke good English. Um, he's now gone. Um, they bring in another guy for the next week of training, who doesn't speak any English. And it's just basically like, what is this guy doing
Yep.
here? So yeah, so I got through that week of training and then come back the next week and he's like, okay, we're gonna or for that weekend, he's like, hey, we're gonna have you play with the second team, which I'm like, I wasn't super thrilled about. They were Landesliga, which for people that's like the
Uh-huh.
sixth tier, um, which is like not so great. I mean, still some okay players, but like I would not stay over there to do that. I think for
Hmm.
a full season, and they so played that game, came back, and he's like, okay, we're actually gonna have you like train with them now for the rest of the time, and they only train
Uh-huh.
twice a week. The first team trains like every night. So all of a sudden, I've gone from like signing for like a pretty good
Yeah.
Regional Liga team to uh, now I'm with the second team training
Mm.
twice a week and playing. So I'm like this could not be any more of a disaster. Um, so But as it is, I'm over there, and I'm like, all right, it's already October. Like we got 5 games. I'm just gonna play these 5 games and then like go back to America and like try to
Yeah.
figure something out. So play those 5 games. Um, come home and like, I mean, good people at the club, good everything like that. Like honestly, in retrospect, wasn't that bad of
Yeah.
an experience. Definitely was not what I wanted. But like that could have been worse. So come back, and then it's, can I find something in America? And this is when I started. I hadn't really done
Okay.
combines before, but this is when I started going on, like putting my stuff out to um, different combines, trying to get invite combines, open combines, anything, any way I could get in front of like
Mm-hmm.
USL teams. That was basically my goal. Um, and it's so funny when you send your stuff out to teams that like, even though I really had accumulated not much experience in Europe, it was like a
Yep.
selling point that I was like, oh, I've played here, I've played there. And it's like they're just like, oh, well, this guy's got an interesting
Yep.
CV. Uh, so it's funny how like how that whole side of things works. But yeah, I was able to get in to ultimately to get into preseason with RGV,
Mm.
which is at that time they were still connected to
Mm-hmm.
Houston Dynamo. They were their second team. So I went down there for their preseason in February, and on the second day of that preseason, I tore my Achilles
Oh
in a
my
training
God.
session. so yeah, so that was me for 9 months after that. So that was 2018, basically done. So now, if you're for those following along at home, we've gone from 2014 to 2018 playing like minimum, like the most football I played was probably that
Yeah.
USL,
And that was probably like
PDL
what,
season,
10, 12
and then
games, something like
outside of that,
that.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, something like that, and then like a handful of games with like in like Landesliga, and then yeah, that was that.
So the question, I feel like I ask many players this, right? And it's always, I give the
Mhm.
caveat of like I sort of already know the answer to it, but I still ask it because I think other
Mhm.
people out there would be curious. It's like, why, why do you keep putting yourself through this fucking hell? You know what I mean? This um another setback. Coach gets fired. I get injured. Like contract gets pulled out from under the rug. And like I said, I give the caveat of like I understand why, because I understand that like with these people that I speak to, there's like something that's just different in their mindset. There's like something that's switched that I don't think normal people have about like this amount of adversity or pushback versus, going after their dream. But can you kind of summarize like what keeps you still going? Like what keeps you okay, I'm getting up and I'm coming back for another round and another round and another, if you imagine like the imagery sort of like a boxer, it's like you just keep getting punched and down to the mat, and
Yeah,
before they count to 10, you're back up and you're ready for more.
I think it's a combination of two things now at this point for me. The first one is like, I just honestly, every a lot of times when I get in those situations, I ask myself, well, what's the
Mm,
alternative? So is the alternative, okay, now am I going to coach? Am I going to work? And it's like, well, that's as much like BS as I've had to put up with. It's still not as fun as
mm,
going to play. So I'm gonna do everything I can to keep playing. Um, so there's a part of that, and then um, there's also an element of like I keep the receipts, like I keep in the back of my mind all the teams that have stuck me on the bench and said I'm not good enough, trials not going through, um, feel like I'm getting screwed over. Like I remember all those people in those moments and think like if I stop now, that basically
mm.
they're right, you know, that their assessment of me was right, and um, that's just something that like I can't live with, or I haven't been able to live with until I get to a certain
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think that's something that you hear from a lot of guys answer it the same way, is that they're just, that big one is the alternative, right? It's like, okay, well, what's the alternative. Um, I think everybody has kind of a different way in which they look at it. I think part of it is, I've said this before. Part of me, like I know I kind of romanticized the journey of it all a little bit. Like I kind of felt like this was such a more interesting movie if you're listening or watching this movie or reading this book about like this story versus just, oh, I graduated and then got some job at Wells Fargo or wherever the hell. Like, don't you want to hear about how I was in Germany and then had to go to all these trials and do all this insanity just to be able to continue to play the game? I think that's maybe what I looked at it a little bit. But it's fascinating because I think every player like has maybe not the same level of setbacks as you have, but everybody experiences setbacks in one way or shape or form. Like this is not a career that you can go into seamlessly and easy by any stretch of the imagination.
Mhm. No, for sure not. And that also, but like dealing with that stuff also makes like the smallest little bits of success
Mm,
feel amazing. Um, like even just a good game, like when you deal with all of that, just to like come back and have a good game, or like even have a good training session with your friends in the off season, like little small things like that feel like
yeah,
the best after you've like dealt with all that stuff, and it keeps reminding you, like I said, this is still better than the alternative. Like I still love doing
yeah.
this every day.
So as you're coming back from that rehab, I have to imagine it's a lot. It's a difficult process to then go and try and find another team to play in after that 9 months where you're out. What did that look like for you?
Hmm. Yeah, so uh very very much difficult. So initially, RGV was like gracious enough to be like, hey, like we'll let, if you can come back and rehab, like we'll give you another
Mm,
chance next year. Which was like awesome of them. So I went back there around about the same time the following year. So this is 2019 now. And yeah, I went there, but I
hmm
wasn't good enough um to make that team. Didn't perform well enough. Wasn't like I was like fit enough. I had done all my rehab, was like all that end was fine, but wasn't sharp enough. Again, now we're getting on, so 2019, so we're getting on like, missed a whole year with injury. That's another year of like barely any to, I mean, literally no
hmm
match experience, right? So I think the cumulative effect of that was just what continued to sort of bite me sometimes in
mm,
these situations. Um, and yeah, I just didn't perform well enough in that. And then from there, um, so one of my dad's former again former player that played for him in college was the coach at
okay.
Richmond Kickers. His name's Dave Below. And I sent him my stuff. Again, it was a little bit a little bit dressed up a little bit more nicely than I've described on this podcast, where it's like, oh yeah, I've played Netherlands, I've been Regional League of Germany
Yeah.
contracts, like all this has just been out for a year with Achilles. So yeah, but I mean, as you know, we have to do that sometimes. And he's like, yeah, like come down to preseason, we'll give you a shot. And at the end of the day, like I think there is an element of like you have to do what you have to do to get these
Yeah.
opportunities, but like you still have to
100%.
perform when you go there. So it's not like, yeah, he gave me a shot, but like I still had to
Yeah.
go in and play well. So yeah, I went to their preseason and like played better. It wasn't They weren't as good as RGV because RGV was championship. Um, but it's not like I was lighting it up, but they were in a transition period. They had more spots to fill, and yeah, I ended up signing with Richmond.
Yeah. To hammer that little point you made there home, it is exactly what you have to do. It's kind of like an advertisement, right? You want it to be a little bit clickbaity. You want whatever that email is that comes across somebody's desk for them to be enticed and want to read more. I think even as I'm sure you've done, a lot of what we do kind of can also manifest in like sending out just emails to clubs, like going and finding a club and finding a contact there and sending a cold email being like, hey, here's my video. I think my like
Mhm.
tagline or subject line in that is like, fullback with like European experience or something like that. Like you don't know what level of European
Yeah.
experience, like you're gonna have to go and click on the CV to figure
Yeah.
out exactly what, and then you might be impressed or you might be disappointed. But you have to like I've heard crazy stories too of guys will be like, yeah, they're like, I'll just sometimes in emails and text just lie just to like, because you got to get your foot in the door to try and like go and get a trial, and that can definitely bite you in the ass. So I wouldn't recommend that at all. But embellish a little bit, right? You want to make yourself look good, and then like you said, then it's about performing. And when you actually get there and the lights are on, and so I have to imagine for you signing then with Richmond Kickers is an experience that you'll always remember coming back from kind of all those setbacks and then signing for that club, no?
Yeah, that was a big deal for me, and like that is where, so with all the times that I sort of have explained to this point that like doing too much, training too much kind of
Mm-hmm.
did not help me out. Like this rehab period was where I could kind of lean on
Mm.
that mentality, and like I during my like I would be in the gym like three times a day, like every day, doing like crazy, you know, bike workouts. I'd be like on my knee scooter with my Achilles doing like boxing training. I'd be doing like one like jump rope, like literally like psychopath workouts. But I really think that like I came out the other end of that in like great
Mm.
shape physically. Um, Especially considering again that like it's not like I have a team, because I don't have a contract, so I'm not signed with anyone to like
Yeah,
oversee my rehab. So a lot of this is like on my own that I have to figure it out. And yeah, my mindset of just like putting my head down and working, I think really helped me in that case. And then signing was like a really big um reward for that, for sure.
100%. Yeah. So did it lead to a season that was kind of reflective of that, or I mean, I'm sure every season has its ups and downs. What was that experience like? Your first kind of opportunity to play in the states.
Yeah, I mean like it was, so the the good part of that season was like it was just all the stuff that I've described before of like dealing
Mm.
with BS.
Yeah.
Like there was none of that. It was just a normal season. Like everything was very well run, great club, great people. Um, you know, obviously training every day, great environment to play in, things like that. So from that standpoint, I really enjoyed it. I honestly didn't play a lot. I was like not a guy who was. I was a guy who was fighting essentially to get on the Ross on in
Mm-hmm.
into the 18 each game. Um, Made like a handful of appearances, but the issue more with that season was not anything external. It was more sort of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast with like
Mm.
mindset. And that's where I was inconsistent. Um I was very, I was more in tune to like being a good teammate, being a good locker room guy and using that to sort of help me establish a role in the team. So things like that were good, but at the same time, I had almost gone too much the other way where like I lost that edge that I had when I was a kid. And I was almost like, because of everything I had put up with, I was just like happy to be
Yep.
training every day, happy to be involved with the team, happy to like, go and be the hardworking guy. But I didn't have that like that killer instinct to like go and try and fight for my spot enough. Um, and yeah, as a result, like over the course of that season, I had, I would have a few weeks where I look great and like I would get an opportunity to start things like that. And then I would have, times where I'm one of the
Mm.
worst players in training. Um, so it's just not very consistent for me. And then I actually did finally kind of break in a little bit, sort of at the midway point of the season, and started to get we had like a little break where we were playing some friendlies, and then I played one league game, was starting in those, and then I got a bad knee injury
Mm-hmm.
just from like a tackle. and was out trying to get back fit, got back in training, but didn't really get back into any
Mm.
games the rest of the season. Um, so yeah, I was struggling with that for the last 2 months, but like overall, like all those things that I talked about, really, really enjoyed it. And like if they had have offered to resign me, they easily would have gone back to there.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that all the guys that I've talked to that have been in and around that club kind of say the same thing, that it's an environment. I mean, obviously Luke, as we mentioned in the beginning, he's been
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that club practically his whole career. So it sounds like it's a place where guys like to play and like to stay if they can. So without that opportunity,
Mhm.
then I think we're going back on the European tour, and it's a little bit of an extended stint in a
We are.
country of Sweden, correct?
Yeah, but we got, we had a little detour first, and this actually isn't even on my transfer market because like I wasn't with the club long enough for it to
Hmm.
really matter, like because I didn't play an official game. But that so following that season with Richmond, was trying to find something in America, didn't pan out, and that was the first sort of rude awakening for me where I got to the end of that season. I'm like, oh well, now I have a season in League One, but at the end of the day, we were one of the worst teams in League One, and I barely played. So it's like, yeah, no duh, you're not going to get a contract
Yeah.
offer from another team. Um, so yeah, again, then we get to the point where it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Had a connection from when I had
Uh-huh.
first gone to Germany, the team that I was with in Regionalliga. This guy that would drive me to training every day, I had like a pretty good like friendship with him. We kept in touch from time to time. I still talk to him a decent amount. Um, and he had stopped playing
Mm.
but became an agent. So he worked for an agency in Germany, and he wasn't trying to represent me because he represents players like we're talking like his direct clients are
Mm.
like Serge Gnabry, like Sadio Mane, like David Raum. So he's
Yeah.
he's a big time agent, but he also does have a lot of connections in the regional leagues and
Yeah.
Oberligas of the world. So I'm like, hey, do you think you could give me a look over there? Um, he's like, yeah. So I go back over. To a team called Bayern Hof, which is Oberliga, and they're in a similar region to Bayreuth, maybe
Okay.
like 30 minutes away. So I go over there, play really well, get signed after a week. This is during their winter break, so this is in February. Um, I play 2 or 3 friendlies, and then COVID
Uh,
happens. So yeah, so this is March 2020 now. I'm in Germany, and COVID comes on, and um, in Germany they they immediately stopped all football. So I
yeah.
came back to America, but with that season they canceled everything
Yep.
below the third league. So Regionalliga and Oberliga were they just canceled the
Mm.
season. Um, and so yeah, so I was in Germany. I signed, but technically
Yeah.
never played a game. So
And then,
that
I
was
mean, that's
frustrating.
obviously
Yeah,
a setback that most footballers have experienced over the past couple of years, whether they've had an opportunity or something kind of
yeah, exactly.
ruined, I guess, so to speak, by COVID. And so, then how long were you actually out of football? Because I know some guys had kind of an extended period of time where they were without a team, without a club, without playing.
Yeah, I was out of football then from March until August, and during that time, I mean, again, I could kind of lean on my like discipline to training consistently. Like it was no problem for me, even with all that uncertainty, to like go out and train all the time by myself, and then as the restrictions started coming up, like go train with groups and stuff like that. But was still always keeping my eye out for any opportunities that came up. And then one of my friends who's uh, lives close to me up in Boston, he was playing in Sweden. This is in Division
Hmm.
Two, which is like the fourth tier in Sweden. And yeah, I was talking to him in early August, and he said, "Hey, we just had a player leave. Like, we need a guy for this position. Would you be able to come over?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll do it." So then a few days later, I was on my way over to Sweden. They only had 2 months left in their season, but for me, it was still better to play those 2 months and like not have that gap in my CV, because then it would have been really, really hard for me, I think,
Yeah.
in 2021. So yeah, that was how I
Hmm.
got over to Sweden.
Wow. The set.
But now you can kind of start to see that more, like the last two have been from now. These are not any connections of my youth career or from my father or any, like these are connections that I've made
Yes.
from like former teammates or friends. I'm starting to get more in tune into that side of things and like how that works, and like um having good relationships with people, like the benefits that
Yeah,
that
I
can give
think
you.
I definitely wanted to bring that up. That I think that's always. I think I try and for any player who's listening to understand the idea that those who say, "Oh, well, the game's so political. I don't have any connections. I don't have a way to get in." It's like you do. You're just not really thinking about it the right way. Because sometimes when people think about connections, they think, "Oh, I don't know any coaches, or I don't know any agents, or sporting directors." And it's like, sure, those are great contacts to have, and you'll eventually get those. However, the more the more likely connection that you're going to use, that obviously a lot of players use, as you've seen, is I played with a teammate here, or I played for this coach here, and then they know somebody who knows somebody. Like there's so many times where I've heard guys tell stories, and it's not even really necessarily somebody who is they have a direct connection to football. It's like, oh yeah, a family friend of mine happened to know somebody, and like when you go around Europe, those sort of connections start to happen. It's less so popular in the United States, but
Mhm.
in Iceland, I'm sure if you bump into like a guy who owns a restaurant, he probably knows six people who could somehow connect you to
Yeah.
somebody in a football club, because it's a small country and football is everywhere. Um, so
Mhm.
that first opportunity in Sweden, obviously that led to you making more connections in that country, and kind of was that your ability to then prolong your stay and find a new club right after that 2 months, or did you stay with that same club?
Indirectly, because like having again it, having that experience in Sweden helped. So I the next club was from reaching out to, I reached out to um
Mm.
an agent on LinkedIn, which is kind of like, again, you can see
Yep.
I'm getting better here every year. Like I'm figuring out where to find stuff. Like LinkedIn, if you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn if you're trying to play like at these fringe kind of European levels, because there's just like crazy offers out there
Hell
flying
yes.
around all the time. Um, but yeah, literally this guy posted like Swedish fourth tier need so this I actually been playing fullback a bit the previous season, so like
Yep.
needs right back. Um, and I was like, yeah, just sent him my stuff. Um, he liked what he saw, and then I think it was a very quick turnaround, like 1 or 2 days. Like I had the contract
Wow.
and was going over there. Um, but this is an interesting one with this team is I did have a contract, and that was to get me in because the COVID restrictions at the time, you needed some reason if you were not a
Yeah.
Swedish citizen to get in the country. Um, but this was like, as far as the agent was concerned, this was the contract. Like, you're going over here, you're signed to this team. And then when I showed up there, I was essentially like not a real contract, and I was like on trial for the first month of me being there. Yeah, absolute like that. I mean, they didn't even have when I got there, they were already, I think, a week into their preseason, and after the first week of preseason, they had fired their coach. So when I show up, they don't
Mm.
have a full time coach, and
And
apparently
do they
now I'm on
know about
trial.
you? Like, do they even know who you are?
So yes, 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 yes. They knew about me, but like in there, like they just told me like this is not like this contract is this was just to get you in the country.
Oh, okay. I see. I see. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So for the first week I'm there, they have like different directors from the club sort of doing the training, um and just putting us through the motions while they try to find a new coach. Um, no, they end up hiring a great coach, English coach, who was
Mm.
previously with Luton Town. And he's probably the best coach I've
Hmm.
had in senior football. And it was this. I mean, crazy. I mean, me and a lot of the players who were there, they had brought in a handful of other international guys on a similar situation with
Mm,
me, where they sort of put this fake contract in front of us and said, "Hey,
mm.
come over and play." Um, but we were all like minded in that we're ambitious, just trying to work our way up, so on and so forth. And he was exactly like us as a coach. Like this was he had coached at academy level, and this was his first chance to coach senior football and sort of test himself in a new country. And so I got on really, really well with him. And, ultimately I did end up signing um, and was going pretty well for the first few months. And then he told me he was going to leave mid-season because he got a job offer in Abu
Ooh.
Dhabi to work in an academy and make like a lot more money
Yeah.
than he was making in Sweden. So it was a great decision for him. And, yeah, I still talk to him a lot, and I'm really glad that all that worked out for him. But yeah, that kind of made that club a little less
Hmm.
desirable to stay at, because um, I mean, there was so much stuff with that club, as you can imagine, with the fake contracts. It wasn't the most
Yep.
buttoned up establishment. So, like, when I tell you we could literally have a podcast just about the 4 months I spent at that club, like
That would
it
be that
was
would be part
insane.
two, just that one
Um,
specific Sweden experience.
KSF Prespa Berlik, craziest team I've ever been on. But so after he left, I'm like, all right, well, he's the only reason I'm staying here is because his training is
Yeah.
excellent and he's a good coach. So I need to like see if I can find something else. So again, back to LinkedIn. Um, saw a post on there, very very similar post from a different agent. Team Swedish Division 2 looking for a right back. Sent him my stuff. He connected me to Eder Hogdal, which is a team. So Prespa
Hmm.
was in Malmo, was really cool living in Malmo, by the way. But this team, Eder Hogdal, was up north, um, close to. They were in the same region as Godney, the
Hmm.
team I played on the previous year, and but they were a better team than way better team than Prespa, and so it was a good move to go up there. And that's where I spent the second
Mm.
half of that season,
Okay. The
2021.
one thing I was curious about, like I know you mentioned in Germany there
Yeah.
was you had signed at one point in like around October, right? And then like at this point, I know the Swedish calendar
Yeah.
works different in terms of their football, but there were never any restrictions about that,
Right.
like kind of falling without outside of the window of like the traditional transfer window or anything like that?
No, so well, the Swedish transfer
Okay.
that was during July, so that was like mid-season transfer window, so that was fine. In Germany, because I was coming from PDL
Okay.
where I was an amateur, and because I was coming in as an amateur, it was fine to sign
Gotcha.
in October
Gotcha.
essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, and all this also was like easily facilitated by the fact that like my dad is he's Irish, so I
Ooh,
have an
okay.
Irish passport, and that made all of this like very very easy as far as getting around
Yeah,
all
so that's
that
the one thing I was gonna
stuff.
ask too, is you never really had that much then worry about like visas or anything like that. Like you always had longer stays. Okay.
Yeah, very
Gotcha.
lucky in that
So
regard
then
for
that
sure.
that's that final season then in Europe up to this point, right? Did that season kind of, was that another crazy one, or was that a little bit more predictable?
Oh my God, I mean, so it was better in the sense that I like that in Sweden both years. Like I did get some decent game experience, like some footage, some highlights that I could come out of there with, and um, like overall okay football experience. Um, but like, man, between Prespa and Eder Hogdal, like I don't even know where to start in terms of the absolute uh, shambles that both those clubs were. Um, I'll give you one. I don't even know. I mean, these stories. I'll try to be quick with both of these stories, but so we'll start with Prespa just
Yep.
because for timeline purposes. So this was like the event that facilitated my transfer essentially. So like I said, the coach was leaving, so I went to the director of the club and said, "Hey, I have this offer on the table to go to Eder Hogdal. Would you sign my release during the summer? And he was not going to sign my release. He was going to like have me stay at the club, um, which I was
Mm.
really really not happy about. Um, but I couldn't really do anything, and I'm like, well, if I stay here and play the rest of the season, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like I'm in Malmo, it is what it is. So we had just uh, at the start of the July transfer window brought in this guy from Netherlands. His name was Cedric. He had played uh, crazy levels in Netherlands previously. Like I think he has 20
Oh,
appearances for
wow.
like FC Utrecht. Um, like played Eredivisie, played most of the time I think in third league, but like came in with a crazy CV. But for the year, I think 2020 he had basically not played any football, and that's why he's in Division 2 Sweden, like trying to
Hmm.
get his feet back under him. But so this guy comes in, and he's living in the team housing with all of us international guys, and I you can immediately tell that this guy is crazy. Um, not
Mm.
stable mentally at all. He's all like in training, he's like kicking guys, getting in fights, mouthing off to the coach, like all this crazy stuff, and they're kind of putting up with him because he's a striker, he's got the CV. We're really struggling as a team. He's going to be
Mm.
the guy that comes in and saves us. So they're like, all right, we'll see how things go when we get into the games. Um, first game that he's supposed to play, he's not starting, um, and he's on the bench, and he's making a whole, basically making a scene in the team talk before the game, in the warm ups, while he's on the bench during the game, like all this crazy stuff. Um, I in that game I was playing, I got subbed out, middle of the second half. I'm sitting on the bench, and I'm continuing to see him go through all this stuff. He's basically trying to sub himself in the game at this point. Um, putting his kid on, going up to the coach, telling him to put him in. It's just this guy is out of this world. Um, Eventually, he like comes back towards the bench with me, and I turn to him and say, Cedric, like, what team have you been on that it's okay to act like this? Like, how do you think
Mm.
this is going to get you in the game? And he he turns to me on the bench during the game
Oh
and
my
he
God.
punches me in the face. The whole crowd is like, what is going on? Like they can all see this because our bench is right behind
Yeah.
or right in front of the stand. um the coach like hears the commotion, the noise on the bench, and he's in the technical area, and he comes back and it's like Cedric, what are you doing? And then um the kid
Oh
turns and
my
punches the
God.
coach in the face during the game. So this is like the type of stuff you hear about in like, I don't know, like
Yeah.
Brazilian like seventh division, like
Yeah.
Sunday league. You know what I mean? Like just unheard of type of stuff. Um, but so directors from the club have to come onto the bench, take this kid Cedric, bring him back to the housing,
Yeah.
pack up all his stuff, send him home. But in saying all that, that basically facilitated
Oh,
me to
okay.
get out of there because I was able to kind of play the sympathy card with the director and be like, hey, like, come on, man, I've
I
dealt
just
with
got
enough
punched in
at
the
this
face
club.
on the
Like
bench. Like, I'm
that
ready to leave.
was, I mean, like I said, got punched, and that was kind of like the icing on the cake to a lot of stuff that, like I said, could be
Yeah.
a whole other separate podcast. Um, but that that got me out of there.
Oh
So that
my
was the
God.
story with the first club. Um, the second one, this isn't as long. This is more just like a general sort of want you to picture this situation is we we got to so I got there in July, playing for 6 weeks. We were doing pretty well when I first got there. We were in, fighting to get promoted, and then we had a bad run of results. And the director of the club was constantly kind of
Hmm.
butting heads with the manager. The director was a Scottish guy, the manager was an Italian guy. They just never really saw eye to eye. The director always kind of wanted to have his input in picking the team, how we should play, things like this. And yeah, just never really let the manager do his job. So after a few losses that we had, he ended up sacking him at the end of August, and we had 2 months to go in the season. But they didn't want to hire a coach for the rest of the season. So for the last 2 months of the season, we didn't have a coach. So our training sessions were run by our captain and our we had a player who was
Yeah.
kind of in like a player coach role, but no one really respected him in that role,
Yeah.
to be honest. So and they were
Oh my
23 and
god.
22. So they're running training for the last 2 months of the season, and then on the weekends, because you had to have a member of staff like
Yeah.
be the coach just for like for logistical purposes. So it would be like basically the directors of the club would like rotate. It'd be like a different guy each week, and literally one week we had our groundsman be. I swear to
Did
God,
they
we had our
ever
groundsman
address
be our
why they
coach.
weren't gonna hire somebody?
Well, so I mean, they had
Okay.
hired someone for the next season, and this is a club. They try to set themselves up to be a fully
Hmm.
professional club in like Swedish Division 2. Not all the teams are fully pro, like very few are, but they try to set themselves up to be. So they pay all the guys well. They, we train every day in the morning. They house all of us, and it's all in this like
Hmm.
very small village. So it's kind of on the outside looks like an ideal place to like put a team together to get promoted. But just because of the guys running it, it just
Mm.
hasn't really come to fruition. um, and a lot of that has come. I think they fired their coach
Oh my
like every
god.
year the last 3 seasons or something crazy. um, but yeah, basically it's like a big ask to get someone
Ah.
to go live there, and coach for 2 months. So they're just kind of like, oh, well, we're not going to get promoted, but we're also not going to get relegated. So we'll just save the money and we'll just have two players from the training sessions. So you can kind of see now that nothing is ever going to phase me
No.
in terms of my career because if I've come out the other end of these things, then like nothing is
No,
worse
and
than any of those
again, like it's the
situations.
reason I do these podcasts because it goes to show people like I think people have an idea of what they hear. Oh, you're a professional footballer. Like they have an idea of what that looks like, and like you said, that expectation
Yeah,
versus reality. Because just imagine you tell somebody I'm a professional footballer, and they show up to your training session where it's some kid running it, and then you're at the match at the weekend, and it's the groundsman on the
yeah,
touchline. You know what I mean? And you're getting punched in the face, and like all this stuff and they're like, "This is not at all what I expected this to be." And so I think it's good, like especially for those of the players that want to do something like this, is just know what you're you know what you're getting into. Like it's gonna be crazy. Whatever route you go, there's gonna be craziness to it, and you just gotta accept that.
yeah, and also know that as as bad as you think your situation is, someone is having it worse, and that guy is me.
and and so now now it brings you to where you're at currently, your current club of Flower City out in Rochester in
Yeah,
Nisa. And as we were talking about, I can't remember now if it was when we were on the air or right before we popped on, but you had a coach that got sacked after the first 5 games. And it was funny even now looking back at the episode we've just done, how you kind of how yeah, you
that's like
characterize it
not
as
even
like yeah, it was kind of to be expected, and but you weren't phased by it whatsoever. It was like yeah, it happened, and now we're playing. And kind of in the research that I've done, it looks like you've been able to kind of play well on an individual level and get lots of games, which I know has been something you've struggled with throughout your career and getting those match minutes. Obviously,
right.
on the team side, it's left a little bit to be desired, so to speak. But what's been the experience like coming back over to the States, playing here, playing in Nisa, playing in Rochester, new club, new city, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, this year has felt like as much. I mean, there's with a new club, there's always going to be like some small issues, but again, like not even comparable to all that other stuff. So this has felt like if anything, like I a little bit of reward for like sticking to it and like
Mm,
continuing to do my thing. And coming out the end of what did we
yeah.
just go over 7 8 years basically of a football career, and like um this is where I kind of feel like okay, like it was worth putting up with all that to now be in a place where like I'm playing, I'm captain, like I feel like
Mm,
I'm valued by the club for probably the first time since I was like under 18. Um, which feels crazy to say, but
yeah.
it's honestly the truth. And yeah, so for me, um, this has been like the most enjoyable season of my pro career. And you know, between all those experiences combined with the work that I've done in the past year and a half on the mental side, um, like I feel more motivated than, not that I ever had a problem with motivation, um, but now my the consistency of my
Mm,
motivation is more stable, and I feel like I you know almost want to play another 8 years to make up for those 8 years that I had before. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like I didn't like I would not feel satisfied if I had
hmm.
stopped playing before this year. Um, and now I feel like there's like everything to play for. And that doesn't mean like, hey, I could not end up moving up to a higher level, but like I just want to see where I can end up. And I still enjoy you know, giving it
Yeah,
everything I
yeah, I think
have
that's
every
a
day.
great place to be in when you kind of have a renewed, like, outlook on the game and on your own, on yourself in the game and what you want to get out of the game. Like that mental side is such a huge thing where it can really completely do a 180 on your perspective. And now it's like, it sounds like even the way you talk about it now, you're at a place where you just feel comfortable sort of in whatever comes with football. Like there's going to be curveballs thrown at you, but you're enjoying the process, you're enjoying getting better. And if you can play more years, then that's even better too, and maybe have some some less crazy experiences that you can foster for yourself. So what's the rest of the season kind of look like for Flower City? It is. I'm trying to remember the NISA schedule. It is kind of wrapping up relatively soon, right?
Yeah, we're on a similar calendar to USL. We might finish. I think we finish our regular season a week earlier, and then there's playoffs after that. We haven't done well enough to make the playoffs, but we have I
Okay.
think 6 games left, and we'll finish mid October. So yeah, no, it's like I said, I really have enjoyed it, and for me, I think what it's come down to now, and it doesn't matter if your team is winning and losing, like or if you're on a good team, on a bad team, like the purpose of why you're going out there should never change, and it's just to stick to you know your process and to
Mm,
try to get better every day. And I think as long as you do that, you know, playing, not playing, whatever, um, I now trust that those results will come. They might not come next week. They might not come, you know, immediately at the end of the season, but wherever I end up, whether that's staying here or going somewhere else after the season, um, I'll get the fruits of that labor. Um, and so that's my attitude for the rest of the season is just try to, you know, play as many games as I can, do the best I can,
yeah.
and see what ends
Yeah, I
up
think that's
happening.
a perfect way to cap it off. An amazing story.
Mhm.
A career that has had a lot of ups and downs, as we mentioned a lot. The roller coaster that is a football career is another perfect example of that. And as I'm sure that you can definitely categorize it as a roller coaster of a career. But I appreciate you taking the time. It was a fun story for me to hear. I'm sure the people are going to like it. And yeah, can't thank you enough.
Yeah, no, that was a blast. Thanks, Brendan. Really enjoyed that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you once again to Alex for taking the time. We got 2 episodes worth of really great content, really great stories. And so I can't thank him enough for taking the time. I know it's not always easy when you're in the middle of a season. Um, So thank you to Alex. Thank you to all of those of you who have listened to both parts of this. I really appreciate it. Thank you to anyone who has listened to any of the past couple episodes. I greatly appreciate your listenership, and it means a lot to me. So be on the lookout. It's got some more exciting episodes coming up on the horizon. Lastly, as I mentioned in the past few episodes, if you would like a way to support the podcast, we are featuring a Patreon page that you can support the podcast, support the show, support kind of the content that we're putting out there. It helps the show grow. It also helps us kind of fund some of the things that we like to do on our end to provide you some cool content. So once again, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.